and you're attacking her, and you're trying to beat her into submission? Really?
Stephanie White has a Caitlin Clark problem, and everybody watching this league right now knows it. The Indiana Fever just absorbed a 34-point blowout on the road in Las Vegas, and that scoreline is not even the most disturbing thing that happened in that building. Because while the Aces were running the Fever off their own floor, Stephanie White was on the sideline completely losing her composure, snapping, erupting, crashing out. Right there on the bench, right in front of Caitlin Clark's face. Again. And the word that should be echoing in your head right now is again. Because this is not a one-time event. This is a pattern. This is a documented, undeniable, recurring pattern of behavior from a head coach who cannot seem to hold it together the moment Caitlin Clark is sitting directly in her line of sight. Welcome back. This is Rim Run, and today we are pulling apart every single layer of what happened on that Las Vegas sideline. Because the footage is real, the pattern is real, and the conversation that the establishment refuses to have about Stephanie White and Caitlin Clark is long, long overdue.
You were flying coach, and now you got team planes.
Yeah.
You're playing before packed houses.
Y'all was sitting next to Tom, Dick, and Harry on flights. Caitlin Clark.
Let me set the stage for you properly, because the scoreline alone does not tell you what you need to know. The Indiana Fever lost to the Las Vegas Aces by 34 points on the road. 34. That is a blowout of the highest order. That is the kind of game where a professional head coach is supposed to be composed, is supposed to be a steadying presence for her players, is supposed to be the adult in the room who keeps the locker room from completely unraveling during a brutal road loss. That is what a professional head coach does. That is not what Stephanie White did. What Stephanie White did, what the cameras caught Stephanie White doing, was snapping, erupting, losing it entirely on the bench in a way that had the entire basketball community talking the moment the footage started circulating. And here is the specific detail that makes this so much more than just a frustrated coach having a bad night. This happened at the beginning of the third quarter, at the precise moment when the Las Vegas Aces were making their run. At the precise moment when Caitlin Clark was on the bench right in front of her. Caitlin Clark had what appeared to be a turnover, and Stephanie White just snapped, completely. Right there, with Caitlin Clark sitting directly in front of her, drinking a Gatorade bottle, watching the whole thing unfold. I want you to sit with that image for a moment. Your head coach, losing her mind on the sideline, and your franchise player, the player who has done more for this organization's visibility and revenue than any single human being in its recent history, sitting right there, watching it happen, unable to escape it. That is the dynamic we are documenting today, and it is absolutely damning.
And you're attacking her, and you're trying to beat her into submission? Really?
Now let me be entirely clear about what the footage shows, because the details here matter enormously. This was not Stephanie White barking at a referee. This was not Stephanie White reacting to a bad call. The cameras caught Stephanie White in a full-on emotional eruption, snapping, visibly pissed, losing it, and the people who have watched this footage closely are pointing to one specific thing. Caitlin Clark was sitting right there on that bench. You can see her leaning forward. You can identify her clearly. And Stephanie White is absolutely losing her composure in that exact moment, in that exact proximity. And here is the accusation that the basketball community is making loudly and clearly. This does not happen when Caitlin Clark is not involved. That is the observation that has people up in arms. People have gone back through the tape, through the games where Caitlin Clark was not playing, through the games where Clark was not in Stephanie White's immediate orbit, and the level of sideline eruption that we are seeing in this footage was simply not present in those games. Not at this level. Not with this kind of raw, unfiltered, visible emotional collapse from the head coach of a professional basketball franchise. The pattern is glaring, the pattern is undeniable, and the pattern points to one uncomfortable conclusion. Stephanie White has a problem specifically and uniquely with Caitlin Clark. Not with losing, not with turnovers in general, not with the stress of a road blowout. With Caitlin Clark, specifically, personally, repeatedly. And here is the moment I want you to watch. Because the commentary on this situation has been building for a long time. And one of the most pointed voices to step up and name what is actually happening is Skip Bayless. And what he said cuts right to the heart of what this franchise's relationship with its most important player actually looks like from the outside. Don't take my word for it. Here is exactly what he said, in his own words.
You were flying coach, and now you got team planes.
Yeah.
You're playing before packed houses.
Y'all was sitting next to Tom, Dick, and Harry on flights. Caitlin Clark.
You're attacking her, and you're trying to beat her into submission. That is what Skip Bayless said, with cameras rolling. That is the frame he put on this entire situation. And when you watch that sideline footage from Las Vegas, and you watch Stephanie White snapping at the exact moment Caitlin Clark is sitting right in front of her, that framing does not feel like hyperbole. It feels like the most accurate description of what we are actually watching play out in real time. Beat her into submission. Let that sit for a second, because that is not the language of a basketball disagreement. That is not the language of a coach frustrated with a player's shot selection or defensive positioning. That is the language of something far more personal, far more deliberate, and far more corrosive than anything a professional coaching relationship should ever contain. And the fact that this eruption happened again, in a game where Caitlin Clark was present, on the bench, directly in Stephanie White's line of sight, tells you everything you need to know about where this relationship actually stands. Let me walk you through the tactical reality of what happened in that third quarter. Because the basketball context makes Stephanie White's behavior even more baffling and more indefensible. The Las Vegas Aces made their run. The Fever were getting blown out on the road. And in that moment, in the most stressful, most demanding stretch of a brutal road loss, what does a head coach owe her players? She owes them composure. She owes them clarity. She owes them a voice that cuts through the chaos and tells them exactly what adjustments need to be made. She owes them leadership. What Caitlin Clark got instead was a coach snapping and erupting directly in front of her on the bench. Now think about what that does to a player. Think about what it does to a player who is already in the middle of a blowout road loss, who is already dealing with the physical and mental grind of a professional basketball season, who is already the focal point of every defense in this league, and who now has to sit on that bench and watch her head coach lose her composure in her immediate vicinity. Again, that is not a coaching moment. That is not a teaching moment. That is a degrading moment. And it has been happening with a regularity that this organization cannot continue to ignore. The relationship between Stephanie White and Caitlin Clark is the central question hanging over this franchise right now. Not the 34-point loss, not the road schedule, not the defensive rotations, the relationship. Because if that relationship is broken, and the footage increasingly suggests that it is, then nothing else this team does on the court is going to matter. Because the most important player on the roster is being managed by a head coach who cannot hold her composure when that player is sitting right in front of her. Is this thing beyond repair? That is the question people are asking. And based on the pattern of behavior we have documented, based on the fact that this keeps happening, specifically in games where Caitlin Clark is present, specifically in moments where Clark is in Stephanie White's direct line of sight, the honest answer is that nobody on the outside can see a clear path to repair. Not without something fundamental changing. And Stephanie White has given zero indication that anything fundamental is about to change. Now let's talk about the bigger picture. Because the Stephanie White sideline situation does not exist in a vacuum. It exists inside a league-wide context that has been building for 2 full seasons, and that context is absolutely essential to understanding why this footage from Las Vegas hit the basketball community the way it did. Skip Bayless went on record and laid out the full indictment of how this league has treated Caitlin Clark, and every word of it is backed by observable reality. He talked about the physical punishment, the way Clark has been targeted, the way opposing defenses don't just guard her with 2 people, they attack her with 2 people. The way it became clear, across the league, that the strategy for dealing with Caitlin Clark was not to out-execute her, not to out-scheme her, but to physically wear her down, to beat her up, to make the game so physically punishing that she either gets hurt or gets rattled enough to stop being the player she is. And it worked, to a degree. Her 3-point percentage dropped in her second season. She dealt with a cascade of soft tissue injuries, the kind of injuries that pile up when a player's body is absorbing punishment that it was never designed to absorb at this volume. Groin pulls, hamstring issues, one after another. And the commentary around those injuries from people who have watched this league for a long time is pointed. The sheer volume of soft tissue pulls, the relentless nature of them, the way they kept coming. It raises questions about what that level of physical and psychological stress does to a body over the course of a season. 42% from 3 in her first year as a professional. Then it dropped. Then it dropped again. And the people who want to use that drop as evidence that she is not the player they said she was are deliberately ignoring the context. The context of a league that decided, collectively, that the strategy for dealing with Caitlin Clark was not basketball. It was attrition. And here is the part of this story that the establishment absolutely does not want you to focus on, because it is the most damning indictment of all. Skip Bayless put a specific accusation on the table that goes beyond individual coaches and individual sideline eruptions. He said, and I want you to hear this clearly, that a significant number of teams in this league are operating with a mindset that is not primarily about winning. The mindset, as he described it, is, I am willing to lose this game as long as Caitlin Clark does not get off. I do not care about the W or the L. I care about making sure she does not have a big night. Think about what that means. Think about what that means for the integrity of the product on the floor. Think about what that means for every other player on every other team who is trying to compete in good faith, who is trying to win basketball games, who is trying to build a career in this league, while opposing coaching staffs are apparently making the calculation that suppressing one player's performance is worth sacrificing the outcome of the game itself. That is not competition. That is targeted harassment with a basketball in your hand. And the contrast that gets pointed to as evidence is brutal in its clarity. Kelsey Mitchell, a genuinely excellent player who has been putting up remarkable scoring numbers, has reportedly gone through extended stretches of dominant performances without seeing a double team, without seeing the kind of defensive attention that would indicate opposing teams view her as an existential threat to their game plan. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark gets blitzed and doubled all game, every game, relentlessly. Not because the defensive scheme demands it, because the goal is not to win the game. The goal is to make sure Caitlin Clark does not get off. That is the admission that is sitting in the middle of all of this. And it does not just apply to opposing teams. It applies to the entire ecosystem of how this league has chosen to respond to the single most transformative player it has seen in a generation. Let me talk about what Caitlin Clark has actually done for this league. Because the people running this league and the people coaching in this league seem to have developed a collective amnesia about the timeline of events. And I want to walk you through that timeline carefully, because it is the foundation of why Stephanie White's behavior on that Las Vegas sideline is so much more than a frustrated coach having a bad night. Before Caitlin Clark entered this league, players were flying commercial, sitting in coach, next to strangers on cross-country flights the night before games. That was the reality of what it meant to be a professional women's basketball player in this country. That was the economic reality of the league they were competing in. Then Caitlin Clark arrived, and the money moved. The attention moved, the television deals moved, the attendance figures moved. The entire economic architecture of the league shifted, not incrementally, not as part of a gradual upward trend that was already in motion, but exponentially, suddenly, unmistakably. Private flights, packed arenas, broadcast deals that would have been unimaginable in the previous era. Every player in this league is eating better, traveling better, competing in front of larger audiences, and earning more money because of the wave that Caitlin Clark created. That is not a debatable point. That is the documented reality of what happened to this league's economics from the moment she arrived. And the people who want to argue that the growth was already happening, that it was incremental year-over-year progress that would have gotten there eventually, they are making the most dishonest possible version of the argument, because there is no version of this timeline where the league reaches this level of visibility and economic strength this quickly without Caitlin Clark. None. The math does not work. The attention economics do not work. The television numbers do not work. And here is the thing that makes the treatment she has received from certain corners of this league so absolutely stunning. The people who benefited most directly from her arrival are the ones who have been the most hostile to her presence. The people who are now flying on private planes that did not exist before she got here are the ones who have made her environment as hostile and as unwelcoming as possible. That is the contradiction at the center of this entire story. That is the thing that makes it so much more than a coaching disagreement or a personality conflict. And Skip Bayless put the sharpest possible point on the core accusation, the one that makes everything else make sense. Listen to this. Because this is the line that cuts through every piece of spin and every deflection and every "it's just basketball" excuse that anyone has tried to offer for the treatment Caitlin Clark has received in this league. Don't take my word for it. Here is exactly what he said about what this league has done to its own golden goose. You were flying coach, and now you got team planes. Caitlin Clark popped up. Everybody got private flights. He said it. Cameras rolling, no ambiguity, no spin. The person who is being attacked and targeted and crashed out on by her own head coach on the sideline of a 34-point blowout is the exact same person who changed the economic reality of every single player in this league. That is the receipt. That is the undeniable, documented, mathematical receipt. And it makes Stephanie White's behavior on that Las Vegas bench not just unprofessional, it makes it ungrateful in a way that is genuinely difficult to process. Because here is what we are actually looking at when we watch that footage. We are watching a head coach who is benefiting from the wave Caitlin Clark created. Coaching in front of bigger crowds, operating with better resources, existing in a league that has more money and more visibility than it has ever had. And that head coach cannot hold her composure when her most important player is sitting right in front of her on the bench. Cannot do it. Repeatedly. Specifically. In games where Clark is present, in moments where Clark is in her direct line of sight. That is the story. That is the brutal, undeniable, soul-crushing reality of what is happening inside this franchise right now. Now let me render a verdict on where all of this goes from here. Because the pattern we have documented is not a pattern that resolves itself. Patterns like this do not get better through silence and through hoping the next road trip goes smoothly. Patterns like this escalate. And the question of what happens next with Stephanie White and Caitlin Clark is the most important question in this franchise's immediate future. Here is what I believe, based on everything we have seen and everything we have documented today. First, the sideline footage from Las Vegas is not going away. It is going to continue to circulate. It is going to continue to be watched and analyzed and discussed by everyone who cares about this league. And every time it circulates, the question gets louder. Why does this keep happening specifically when Caitlin Clark is on that bench? The establishment cannot suppress that question. The league office cannot make it disappear. The footage exists. The pattern exists. And the people watching this league are not going to pretend they cannot see what they can clearly see. Second, the pressure on Stephanie White to provide a credible, specific, detailed explanation for her behavior is going to intensify. A vague post-game answer about competitive intensity is not going to satisfy anyone who has watched this footage. A generic statement about coaching passion is not going to close the loop on a documented pattern of behavior that appears specifically and consistently in games where Caitlin Clark is present. The bar for what constitutes an acceptable explanation is higher now than it has ever been, because the footage has made the pattern undeniable. Third, Caitlin Clark is going to keep playing. She is going to keep competing. She is going to keep being the focal point of every defense in this league. Keep absorbing the double teams and the physical punishment and the targeted harassment that has been described as a league-wide strategy. And she is going to keep getting better, because that is what she does. Her three-point percentage has bounced back. She has been in the gym, she has put on muscle. She has done every single thing a professional athlete is supposed to do in response to adversity. She has not quit, she has not checked out. She has not given the people who want her to fail the satisfaction of watching her fold. Caitlin Clark is still here, still competing, still the most important player in this league. And no amount of sideline eruptions from Stephanie White, no amount of double teams from opposing defenses, no amount of targeted physical punishment from players who decided that beating her up was a more viable strategy than actually trying to beat her. None of it has broken her. None of it has beaten her into submission. And here is the final thing I want to say, because it is the thing that the people running this league need to hear most clearly. The wave that Caitlin Clark created is not guaranteed to last forever. Waves like this, the kind of transformative, exponential surge in attention and revenue that happens when a generational talent arrives and captures the imagination of a mainstream audience. Those waves are fragile. They require care. They require the people in positions of power to recognize what they have and to protect it and to nurture it and to treat it with the respect and the gratitude that it deserves. What this league has done instead is treat its golden goose like a problem to be managed, like a threat to be contained, like a player to be beaten into submission. And the footage from that Las Vegas sideline, Stephanie White snapping, erupting, losing her composure right in front of Caitlin Clark's face, in a blowout road loss, in a moment that was caught on camera and shared with the entire basketball world. That footage is the visible, undeniable symbol of exactly that dynamic. The people who run this league have a choice to make. They can acknowledge what is happening and address it honestly and make the structural changes necessary to ensure that Caitlin Clark is being supported and protected and treated with the professional respect that her contributions to this league have absolutely and unambiguously earned. Or they can continue to look the other way while a head coach crashes out on the bench in front of her franchise player and the basketball community watches and documents and asks the same question louder and louder with every passing game. Why does this keep happening? The establishment has been choosing option 2. The establishment has been looking the other way, and that choice is going to have consequences that this league will be dealing with long after Stephanie White's tenure as head coach of the Indiana Fever is over. Because Caitlin Clark is still here, still competing, still the most important player in this building, in this city, in this league. She is sitting on that bench right now, drinking her Gatorade, watching her head coach lose it, and she is not breaking, she is not folding. She is not giving anyone the satisfaction of watching her quit. That is who Caitlin Clark is. And no sideline crash out from Stephanie White is going to change that. Here is the forced choice I want you to weigh in on, because this is the question that cuts to the heart of everything we have discussed today. Drop your answer in the comments right now. Do you believe that what we saw from Stephanie White on that Las Vegas sideline was directed specifically at Caitlin Clark? Yes or no? And if yes, do you believe this relationship is repairable, or is it already over? Those are the two questions. I want to see every single perspective in those comments, because this conversation is bigger than one game and bigger than one blowout loss, and it deserves to be had openly and honestly. If this video gave you something to think about, hit that like button right now. It takes 2 seconds and it means everything for this channel. Subscribe if you are not already here, because we are going to keep pulling on this thread, keep documenting this pattern, and keep having the conversations that the establishment refuses to have. Hit that bell notification so you do not miss a single video. This is Rim Run. We will see you in the next one.